What is culture actually? I'm pretty sure I have a basic idea of what culture is. I mean, it's the categorization of old spooks into one spook in a way. It's created through compiling different sort of social constructs that people made due to being social. People categorized themselves in groups when they were like primitive, and that groups they all had different sort of ideas on how things work that they created to combat and accept what other people say as true. So back then, all the way back in the primitive ages, people were wild animals doing whatever bullshit they did, like incest or something. Uh, they would group together in a little group. Each person, since people were like thinking and they wanted to create ideas on how things work, and they were lying to themselves about bullshit because they didn't want to be feral, they wanted sociality. They start talking to each other, right? And in this communication of sorts, they try to ask questions and explain the world. That's what created this whole bullshit. They create constructs like gods to explain certain ideas, or constructs like morality to get a guideline on what this group should and shouldn't do to each other, some sort of boundaries, right? They create that so that there's law and order in these groups, so that they're more social and they can categorize themselves as a sort of family, as a tribe, because family was like the first ever form of state in a way, because tribes come from family. Originally, tribes were family. They had their own outlines, their own traditions being social constructs and all of this. They had their own ideas. And those ideas, those traditions, those concepts that they make up in their minds, those mindsets that they have, because in the end it's all mindsets, they categorize and lump into a new spook, a new social construct called culture. Culture, in a way, could be explained as mindset. It's a mindset. It's how you think, it's how you believe, it's your morals, your traditions, your ideas of what's good and bad, your thoughts, everything. Counterculture is a creation against culture that tries to criticize culture, but once again, it falls under culture because it's still criticism of something. It's still culture. It's still a mindset. It's just the opposite of it. It's trying to fight against the current culture by creating a new form of culture that's made to oppose it. And it's in the word counterculture. It's culture. This is still a mindset. That's a problem. Culture can easily be described as a mindset of a group of people. Easy? Therefore, all philosophical things that are like spread through families or religions can be counted as culture too. Nihilists, it's a group of people with the same idea and basic understanding of things. Technically, if you want to describe it as a culture, it could easily be one. The only difference is that it is completely willing and it doesn't have any sort of coercion. That's the main difference between mindsets and culture usually. It's that culture tends to have some sort of coercion to it. You grow up in a family teaching this, it becomes your mindset. It's something you learn from the elders and blah blah blah. Feral living is culture. A person does not is not born knowing how to live. Yes, you can like children who are abandoned, especially like now and back then and feral ages, they would die because they didn't understand how to hunt or how to do stuff or stuff like that. They didn't understand how to survive. Therefore, the culture of survival that is, feral living is still a culture in general. It's a mindset taught down and down and down about how to survive. It's been reused as a culture of sociality nowadays, like what's okay and social and what's not. It's not okay to kill. It's okay to, I don't know. Nowadays, I think it's pretty sure it's okay to be gay, which I mean, it is, but the problem is, back then it wasn't. That's the whole thing. We created a new form of the culture through a counterculture of what used to be bad. It used to be bad to be gay for some reason. I don't even know why, but well, I do. It's religion, so because people just generally didn't like it in general. And now we taught that it's good because of a counterculture strike. We created a new form of culture, and in that we combined It's kind of like Hegel's idea of dialect. We combined the culture with the counterculture to create our new culture. We took the countercultural idea of homosexuality and combined it to our culture to create something new. And here, the only problem is we never fully categorize it. That's why in some places there's still homophobia and all this other stuff. There's actually a lot of things about dialects that I do appreciate. The only idea is it only applies to metaphysical things in quotations, which are unreal concepts, things that aren't like in reality but are taught. Your mind is basically dialectal in a way. And by that I don't mean like, oh, the way you think it's dialectal. I mean the ideas of culture and the justifications and the morals. Those are all dialectal. You cannot understand the idea of what's wrong until you have the idea of what's good, because you need something to contrast it to. You need a common enemy. It's with nationality too. You can't really believe you're part of a group unless there's an outside group to that. You know, like there was the Jewish people and the Gentiles, there was Americans and anyone who's non-American, and it's always something. It's what led to all the fascism and all this nationalism. You need some sort of thing against it to create it as a purpose, and usually it's just a dualism that's good enough for these people, but sometimes it's applied the Hegelian idea of dualism, the dialectic thing. I consider dualism and dialectics to be like almost similar concepts in general. Dualism is what people usually need. They don't create a synthesis. Usually they're just okay with this and the opposite of this. It gives each other purpose. Even though both of those don't exist, you need some sort of defining against to create a nationality or something. Um, but sometimes they do have the Hegelian idea when there's some sort of disagreement in how things are supposed to work, or a rebellion, some sort of against something unnatural to these people, because most people are usually submissive and I don't want to say sheep, but zombies, basically zombies. Usually they just go with whatever's the social norm. But when certain people are oppressed, you get some sort of identity crisis from that, and you realize, actually, I don't like the system, and you decide to start a revolt, a revolution, or something, a rebellion, and that's what leads to the Hegelian idea of these contradictions. I mean, look throughout history. There's Hegelian idea in materialism, you know, Marx's whole thing, and there's also a Hegelian idea in culture, how culture works. Every single time there's some sort of liberation program or something like that, you have the anti thing, the culture, you have the pro thing, the counterculture, and together they create a synthesis, which is the same culture but slightly different. And usually the full liberation thing is still never resolved, such as sexism. There's still sexism right now. There's still sexism. But now we have a new form of culture where sexism is supposed to be a bad thing, and although some people disagree with that, it's an internal confliction that we have right now. We had the culture which was pro-sexist, the counterculture anti-sexist, and that created the new culture, which was this supposedly liberal thing where people were still allowed to disagree with the culture, which led to our new situation, which probably kind of sucks right now, with these new incel movements, which is like you have to, you know, anti-sexist culture and these incel idiots counterculture, and soon enough later, because of this current situation, sexism might arise again. It's a probable solution, but in culture there's usually some sort of counterculture that leads to this synthesis, and that's, you can see that throughout history. Yes, there are groups that fail at creating their counterculture, but that's only because it's all about the strength of these people, the will, like not like will to live or will to die, but will to power as well. It's a different kind of will, though. It's not the ego will. It's will in a different definition, the niche definition of how strong these people are and the charisma of these people. I mean, for majority of this stuff, it's also with materialism as well, you know, material dialecticism, whatever. It's these people are deluded by the idea of class. They were deluded by culture, they're deluded by class. You have like the stronger class, the oppressed class, and then you get the synthesis, which is the same thing, but slightly different. You have a new stronger class and a new depressed class. And the whole idea of socialism is like, well, what if we, instead of just doing Hegelian dialectic and just keep creating new stronger classes, what if we create a system which just outwardly tries to screw over the strong people every single time, so eventually they have to become equal, and we get rid of the delusion of class? Simple as that. But the whole thing of, I don't think you can apply that to culture though. You can't create a culture that's made specifically to just counteract the culture, because counterculture in a way becomes a new culture and it doesn't counter itself. Counterculture doesn't counter itself. It only counters the appropriate culture that takes over the world. You can't have counterculture be the main culture because it goes against its definition, since you need people are things concepts that don't actually exist are defined by its opposite basically. You can't have counterculture if culture doesn't exist. So if counterculture is the main culture, then it doesn't make sense because it defies the definition, the standard. Therefore, I'm pretty sure um, that you cannot apply the Marxist solution to class to culture as well. The culture dialectal cannot be fixed. The only way to do that is to leave both the anti-culture and the cultural thing and realize that there is no value in anything and begin a sort of nihilistic approach where you do whatever you want inside of culture, inside of anti-culture, whichever, do whatever you want. And if that happens to everyone, if everyone does that, which is very unlikely, that's very unlikely actually. No one's going to do that. But if everyone does it in some utopian world, then you create chaos, and that'll eventually become its own culture, really. Because if you're taught that nothing matters, and you teach that to the children, nothing matters, and you keep teaching that to everyone, eventually it's just going to be the same thing. You don't value anything. It's a culture of no value. Everything's basically value. Nihilism is value if it becomes taught down and down and down again. Um, Lanza had a culture. His culture was just nihilism. I have a culture. My culture is just nihilism. I don't have anything. And that's really it. The only difference between nihilistic culture and counterculture and culture is that nihilistic culture does not work in the Hegelian dialectal of culture, which is, culture, counterculture, synthesis. Nihilistic culture cannot be added to culture. It's incompatible. Nihilistic culture is a thing that's left out of the counterculture, that's pushed aside from both sides. It is something that lives outside of the dialectal system, therefore it cannot apply to the system. I mean, if there's some sort of dialectal system where it's culture, nihilistic culture, the result will always just be nihilistic culture taking over or losing. It's either losing or taking over. That's it. There's no synthesis to that. And if nihilistic culture wins, you get chaos. You get the end of everything. There's no sort of solution to that. Because people cannot live without some sort of law or power unless they really, really, really fear consequences. But not everyone will fear consequences. Not everyone will just fit in like I do just because, oh, I don't want to get hurt. Some people want to get hurt. Some people want that stuff. And they will cause mass destruction. They are liberated. And really, that's kind of why nihilistic culture really shouldn't win if you want to keep society. I don't really care if nihilistic culture wins or not. But the thing is, it lives outside of the dialectic of how society is supposed to go, how culture is supposed to go. And I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Cultural dialect, it works. So I guess I should probably make a list of how these dialectal stuff works. But in terms of social things and ideas that don't really exist, yeah, you need something to go against it to convince people that it exists in the first place. You can't have, well, you actually can have God without the devil, but then you can't explain evil in this world. You have to use man as the real devil. So you can't have God without some sort of bad side to it, because it's like, oh, well, is God evil? That goes against the definition of God. He's all pure good. Then what's the evil? Man's the evil. Man's the devil there. Or Satan's the evil. Satan's the devil there. or sin. There has to be some sort of counteraction to that. So it's dualism. Dualism and dialect. That's only two things in this whole social fake world that they have going on. But I think that was productive.